Hello, my today's guest is Dr. Hossein Askari. He allowed me to call him Dr. Hossein. And how are you, sir, for the beginning?
I am well. It's nice to be with you.
Thank you very much that you accepted my invitation. I have established kind of format, and at the beginning I introduce my guest, so I would like to start with it, and then I will have some questions, and I hope you kindly will answer them. I will share my screen now. Hossein Askari was born in Iran and received his elementary and secondary education in the United Kingdom. He then came to the United States, where he earned his bachelor degree in civil engineering, attended the Sloan School of Management, and received his PhD in economics, all at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was an instructor at MIT and then assistant professor of economics at Tufts University, then associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin in 1975, then professor of international business and Middle Eastern studies at the University of Texas at Austin in 1978. In 1982, Dr. Askari came to George Washington University, where he served as chairman of the International Business Department, director of the Institute of Global Management and Research, and the Iran Professor of International Business and International Affairs from 1998 to 2018. Dr. Askari served for 2.5 years on the executive board of the International Monetary Fund and was a special advisor to the Minister of Finance of Saudi Arabia. In this capacity, he frequently spoke for Saudi Arabia at the IMF executive board. He assisted in the negotiations of $10 billion loan to the IMF, and he developed the idea of a special code increase for Saudi Arabia, giving Saudi Arabia an effective permanent seat on the IMF and World Bank executive boards, and promoting Saudi Arabia's membership to the G20 committee. During the mid-1980s, he directed an international team that developed the first comprehensive domestic, regional, and international energy models and plan for Saudi Arabia. During 1990-1991, he was asked by the governments of Iran and Saudi Arabia to act as an intermediary to restore diplomatic relations. And in 1992, he was asked by the Emir of Kuwait to mediate with Iran. Dr. Hossein Askari has written many books, and mostly on economic and human development in the Middle East, conflicts and wars in the Persian Gulf, Islamic economics and finance, social and economic justice in Islam, international trade and finance, agricultural economics, oil economics, and economic sanctions. And what I found from the internet, that information, 34 books, over 100 research journal articles, and numerous chapters in books and magazine articles. Again, the information changed. Maybe now those numbers even are higher. That's the moment that I found from the internet. In January 2019, Dr. Askari became emeritus, retired, and he devotes his time to the tax-exempt Islamicity Foundation. I hope we will talk about that today mostly, which he incorporated to manage the Islamicity Indices program. This is, again, very brief information that I found from the internet. And would you like to add something or to correct me if I made any mistakes?
No, you made no mistake, but it is too much. I think you can make anyone look good on paper, but you're very generous and very kind. That's more than I deserve. So I have nothing to add.
Thank you very much, Hossein. You're very humble. I think when we started, I talked to you a little bit about the prehistory of this interview. I grew up in a Muslim country. We don't have a Muslim in our constitution, but mostly most of population are Muslim. And but it happened that maybe about half of my life I lived in non-Muslim countries where population mostly are not Muslims. And we had some discussions with my friends, and Muslim and non-Muslim friends. We discussed this sentence. I kept it on the screen. I will turn off the screen, sir. I went to the West and saw Islam, but no Muslims. I got back to the East and saw Muslims, but no Islam. Some of my fellows told me that there was a dervish some couple of hundred years ago, and he traveled around the world. That was his conclusion. And then I made search myself. I just copied and pasted this sentence in Google, and I found two links. I mean, a bunch of links, but first link, that was a website. It's called the Islamicity, islamicity.org. And second came the name Muhammad Abdu. And Muhammad Abdu, he was Egyptian Islamic scholar, journalist, teacher, editor, judge, and officially he was a Grand Mufti of Egypt. And what I found out from the Wikipedia, he was his father was Turkish, Kurdish ancestry, and her mother, I believe, was Egyptian. And he was one of the central figures of the Muslim reformism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But I would like to come back to your website that I mentioned. I made search, and maybe it's shameful for me, but I never heard about the Islamic Index, Islamicity Index, and I made more search, and I found your articles with your names. And then I started reading as far I can understand. My academic background is not economy, so I cannot say that I understood everything, but even I understood something. And that was something that was told by Muhammad Abdu, actually. That's, I found a mathematical proof of his words. My first question is, how did you come to this idea to evaluate mathematically how economists of countries, follow Islamic rules, Islamic standards?
Now I will actually go back a little bit on my background so you understand the full context. I as a child, my father died when I was 9 years old. And I was sent to England to a British boarding school. And in those days, when I went in the early 1950s, British boarding schools, I'm sorry, I think would make the US Marine Corps look like a country club. We were beaten all the time. There was a great deal of injustice. And from that day on, I felt that the only thing that mattered to me was standing up for what was right. And I have never compromised on that, or nearly never compromised. In the sense, when I see somebody doing something wrong, even if they're within my own family, I will inform them and I stop talking with them and tell them you have to change. So that became kind of the mantra of my life, and it became very, very important to me as I grew up. And then in Iran, under the Shah, I saw Savak doing things which I disagreed with. And that's one of the reasons I never went back to live in Iran, and I stayed in the United States. The only reason, because I came from a family background that I could have, if money was my goal, I could have had that. And if being in the government, I was offered a job, I didn't want to do that. And then I traveled a lot at that point in my life within the Arab world, because I became advisor to the Minister of Finance of Saudi Arabia. And so I saw conditions in Saudi Arabia also. And I saw Qatar, I saw the Emirates. And of course, I went back. And I went back to Iran also after 1991, after having been away from Iran for over 20 years. So I saw a lot of Muslim countries, and I went to Egypt and so on, Tunisia. And I just knew very little about Islam, except what I had done in the early 1970s about what Islam said about economics. And how that interest bloomed from that was that in Islam, to me, it was very, very clear that whatever is under the ground, namely depletable resources, belong to all of the inhabitants of that country, that terrain. It didn't belong to the rulers. It belonged to all the inhabitants, not just of this generation, but all future generations. Namely, what God had put there was not for me, was not for just me and my family, was not for us at this point in time, but it was for all future generations. That is how I got interested in this thing. And because I saw, on the one hand, the injustice, how people lived, and in all of these countries. I'm sorry, we can discuss any of the countries you want. The corruption is over the top. The way some of the rulers live is over the top, and everything is un-Islamic, if you want to look at it that way. So I became more and more interested, and I asked myself, well, what is a good way that we can convey what Islam is all about in a simple form? And to measure, in fact, if the people of a country are following what they preach. Are they practicing what they preach? And that became my goal, because I said to myself, maybe this is the way to change these countries, that I can go with this and say, hey, country X, you say you're a Muslim country, and this is very important to you. Are you doing the things? I don't care if you pray. That's not my goal. I don't want to see if you pray and if you go to the mosque. I want to see if you do the important things that Islam demands. As I believe the Prophet Muhammad said once, is just praying and not doing the other things that the religion demands. It's like a body without a head. And so I really wanted to know if these countries did that. That was on the one side. And on the other side, I saw in the Western world, Islam getting a bad name. That basically Islamists, terrorists, they became synonymous, the two words. And I wanted to show that, no, this is not Islam. This is the people in these countries and the rulers that are perverting this religion. They're not following this religion. So I wanted a simple thing to be able to show the Muslims that they're not really good Muslims, and to show to the Western world and the rest of the world, the non-Muslim world, what is this religion really all about? It's not a threat to you. They don't want to kill you. Because I think when you look at the West, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but I can tell you in the United States, they're more afraid of Muslims than anything else. That Muslims are more discriminated against than any other religion, race, whatever, more than African Americans, more than Jews, more than anyone, because they're afraid. And so I thought this would be a way to open up this space so these countries could flourish and develop, because in my view, they're not, and also to join the two sides together, the Western world understanding Muslim. That was my motive. That's how this whole thing started.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's explained a lot. Actually, it's very good reasoning to start. I've noticed that people from any religion can talk about his or her own religion, and I respect all religions from people from all religions. Mostly they say about the same, that my religion is very generous, very honest, and all religions teach people how to be honest, how to be fair. All religions. I don't see any, I don't know any religion would say that as a go and lie or kill or stab someone. Yeah, there is no good, bad religions. There are good, bad people, in my understanding. And again, I'm coming to your Islamicity index. I would like to, again, share my screen. Just I made a little extraction from your website. And I found the reports. I see you post the reports for every year. I found that 1999, 1920s, and I would like to refer to the last one to bring that table. I hope I will be able to do that.
While you're doing that, can I just add something?
Sure, sir.
You mentioned that all religions are basically the same. At their core, I think they have a lot of the same elements. Of course, there's some slight differences. One religion will stress something versus the other. But I think that in the end, for me, all religions have one thing in common, which is the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. And, yes. You know, if we all followed that, it'd be a wonderful world, but we don't. So religion is used to basically divide as opposed to bring people together. And my whole idea would be to, in fact, show that, you know, we can all live together. So that's the, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to add that.
No, that's exactly, actually, when I have discussions in Canada, most of my friends and neighbors, they are not Muslims. And one of my neighbor and very good friend, he's a Catholic, and he's also a very religious person. And we talk about, you know, both of the religions and within our knowledge. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I know a lot about religions and even about Islam. And he told me that, you know, when you talk about the Islam, and I see that maybe we have about 1-2% differences, but about 98% is common things.
Sure.
And almost the same time, we both said the same word, the same sentence, that, but unfortunately, we'll leave that 98% behind and always argue about that 1%. So yeah, that's exactly, we have more common, absolutely, much more common than differences. Yeah, I would like to come back to that, your website, and I will not ask you how you evaluate the index. Probably it's very too mathematical. But here on the left side column, I'm sorry again, I kind of like deleted some countries because it was the too long list.
Sure.
Of course, at first, 42 countries on the top, the highest rank mean that these are countries whose economies follow more Islamic way. Let's say, you will correct me if that is not exact definition. And the most Islamic economy starts is in Malaysia, and their rank is 43. So it means that 42 non-Muslim countries follow Islamic rules better in their economies.
But no, I have to interrupt you.
Sure.
Is that, as you know, this index of ours has different components. These scores that you have up there, these are the overall, which combines the economy, legal and governance issues, human and political rights, and also international. So we have divided them up. So ours is not just purely on the economy, but it is on all of those. So the scores, as I said, that you have up there, it is the overall scores when you combine those 4 sub-indices into one overall index. I should point that out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. Even that I saw in your papers you mentioned of the justice and everything. So that's, yeah, it's a kind of complex index. It's not just
Yes.
a pure economy. Yeah, exactly. And I see these countries, and one kind of correlation I found between the ranks and those indices, that most of these countries, New Zealand, Iceland, and Canada, I'm happy Canada is among the 9th, and United States, most of these countries are successful countries economically, and they have a better management. So that is kind of first came to my mind. However, if you look at these countries, like almost from all continents, countries with very different background, historical background, with very different culture. I see very large countries, very small countries, like United States, Canada, and Luxembourg. And I see former countries with former socialist economies like Czech republics, some former Soviet republics like Estonia, and I see the Asian countries like Japan and Hong Kong. I see the Israel. So different countries. And what do you think? Why these countries decided to follow this way? I don't think they did have some intention that, okay, let's follow this Islamic rules and we will get better. Was it kind of like a choice between just because it's profitable, or it was something about moral?
I think that's a actually relatively easy question to answer. Is that for me, and I think for a lot of people who have written, philosophers and also economists, what defines a successful country, which is your point, is to have good, effective institutions. Countries that have effective institutions, of course, one of them being the rule of law is the most important. Those are the countries that in the end succeed. When countries don't have effective institutions, and by institutions, it's a whole host of literature. People have won, actually one gentleman called Douglas North won the Nobel in economics, although he did not just talk about the economy, but effective institutions are at the foundations of successful countries. I think these countries did adopt and do have had, continue to have effective institutions, whereas when you look at the countries on the right-hand side of your your table, uh, I'd be hard pressed to say any of them, maybe, three or four, these Muslim countries have tried to have good institutions. And I don't think necessarily it's Islam. It's none of that, but it's effective institutions. And I think that you were very nice to the United States, but the United States is not ranked very high. Americans like to say we are the shining city on the hill, but this country's got a lot of problems in terms of its institutions. Its rule of law, a lot of people would argue that it's not a just system, that everyone is equal in front of the law. I think a lot of people would argue that in the United States, some of the economic institutions that we have, our taxation system is not fair. It results in inequality. Now, some of that matches Islam, because in Islam, at least my understanding of the religion is that no one should have exorbitant amount of wealth. Islam believes in a market system, very, very strong property rights, which is another important institution, that in fact private property in Islam is protected. No one can just come and take it away. But in the United States, some of the rules that we have are not really, some of the institutions are not really effective. And that's what I think is why the United States is low down. And I think also in Islam, for instance, we believe that everyone should have the basic needs to develop, to grow, to become a better human being, to have education and so on. Well, in the US, we don't have all of that. So it's all, when you combine all of those things, as you can tell, it's very, very simple. And by the way, I have the latest indices, which we'll be putting up in the next week or so. And I can tell you what those are, not much of a change, is that Northern Europe, basically, Canada, and Australia and New Zealand are it. I mean, I'm sorry, that's the name of the game. And year after year, they're it. Whereas when you look at the Muslim countries, they go up and down, because they don't have this effective institutions. And as I said, I'm sorry to say it again, but the most important for me is the rule of law, that everyone is equal in front of the law. And I think the institutions, obviously, other things we can get into that are important, but that's the key.
Another thing that what I noticed, again, I'm not a social scientist, an economist, just, my very brief understanding that the top countries, according to your ranking, they are mostly the countries with stronger social programs.
Absolutely.
Does it mean that countries with stronger social programs, they also have more effective economy? Or am I correct, or it's not the same?
I would agree with you that there's a high correlation. You're absolutely correct that all these countries at the top have more effective social programs. And again, on our index in Islam, Islam looks down on living in ostentatious luxury. And I don't want to get political. I hope you allow me and you permit me to say this. But when you look at some of the well-to-do countries, we don't have to mention names, not to upset people, in the Persian Gulf, very, very rich countries because of oil and natural gas, how the rulers live and how the cronies live, that is not Islamic at all. Because Islam says you should have a modest lifestyle and you should not hoard wealth, because wealth in some ways is the lifeblood of a country. It should be circulated so the country can flourish. So you're absolutely correct that by our index, the countries that have stronger social programs, that give everyone the opportunity to develop, to grow, those are the countries that would rank by far the highest. And countries that don't have that, just just don't make it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with criticism. Even moreover, I think it's a little bit nowadays. Probably we have very high level of political correctness, and if you say something, you have to think that this one can hurt someone's feeling. But I think we both are Muslims, at least we identify ourselves as Muslims. So if someone else criticizes Islam, it upsets people. But I think we have some moral rights to criticize ourselves. I think it's sounds very fair. So if someone else tells me, we have in my culture, we have the word, if someone tells something bad about my brother, I get upset, but I can't tell that. So if something
yeah, sure. I agree with you.
Yeah. So I think it's totally fine. Who else would criticize us if not us, not ourselves? Yeah. So and I want to continue that criticism. As I mentioned, I'm a religious person, and you know that we have a respect to all prophets, and first of all, because that's my faith, right? But even for non-religious, even for atheists, or they admit, when I read the works of atheists, social scientists, they all admit that prophets, they were greatest reformers of their times. And again, according to my beliefs, the prophets, they were sent to their time, to their communities, to reform their society. There was a need, even again, forget about the religions. And we can say the same about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he was one of the greatest reformers of his time. I mean, even just to imagine, he left his tribe behind. He resisted to his tribes, and he changed all those rules, tribal rules. And even now, it sounds so unbelievable that you say that all people are equal, all races, all nations. Now imagine in 7th century to say that that all races are equal. Unfortunately, even now we cannot achieve that equality. So yeah, but he's told now it sounds like, yeah, so what? Yeah, that's indeed. And but I just put myself that time, and I see that is unbelievable. You're telling to your that's leaders of your tribe, you're telling that you're not right. You shouldn't follow your fathers, your grandfathers. It's again, I'm sorry, in my community, even now you cannot say that, my father was wrong, even if he was wrong. It's you have to be very real reformist. But now, what I see, even I read some articles of some economists, and they make some, projections about the futures of economies, and some kind of review of economists of different countries. And there is a kind of opinion that Islamic economies, they cannot be reformed. They don't see some progressive ideas in Islamic economics. Why do you think it happens? Why our days, the economists, and in general, I would even say that the societies of many Muslim countries, they are reluctant to reforms?
You see, when I look at the Muslim world. And of course, I'm sure you're aware that there are people who say that Islam is just incompatible with modernization. Islam is incompatible with reform, but Islam is compatible with autocracy and dictatorship. Now, I think they're absolutely wrong. I think that what you mentioned, if I may just elaborate a tiny bit, if you look at Arabia in the 7th century, it was not just backward, it was very, very backward. People were dirty, they didn't know how to wash themselves, they were unclean, there were all of that going on. So yes, the Prophet Muhammad was a reformist. He introduced things to change, and I would call those institutions, to change those countries. And I think when you look back, although I think, I'm sorry to, I hope we don't disagree too much on this, a lot of people kind of look at, Islamic history or Muslim history, and they say, oh, it was the glorious days, but there were problems in those days too. I mean, when you look at the caliphates that were murdered, I mean, it was just horrendous when you look at it. I think of the first 4 caliphs after the Prophet, 3 were murdered, assassinated. So, it wasn't all peachy keen. There were conflicts, but he tried to establish institutions, and there was a resistance. I think in any system, you need to have an enlightened leader and enlightened people around him. And I think that, unfortunately, if we may move up to the present, when you look at the countries of the Muslim world, I don't see any people like that. I think that if you, and I'm not saying this because of my little index here, if you kind of put a gun to my head and say, which Muslim countries do you kind of think is doing things right? I would say it's Malaysia. But Malaysia's got a lot of problems too. But I would say, they're doing a lot of things right. But they've got corruption, horrendous types of things. So, and the leaders, I think, in recent years have been corrupt. So what I always go back to, I think that I really am hopeful. Now, I don't mean to sound like a revolutionary. Please forgive me. I'm not trying to incite anything. But I really think that what I had always hoped in some Muslim country, doesn't matter to me which, that a leader would rise who had all the right instincts and result in a flourishing country. I think then that would be kind of the thing that all Muslims and the rest of the world would look at. They would say, look, and they would try to emulate that country. Now, I was actually totally stupid at one point in my life. I've been stupid many times. At first, and it was pointed to me that I was stupid, that I thought in the Middle East, maybe Turkey had a chance. And of course, I was totally wrong. I mean, and I always like to learn from my mistakes. But I really think that if you take a country, Iran, after the Iranian Revolution, I think Iran had a chance, but it went down the tubes in many ways, in my estimation. And nowadays, I look at it and I say, well, maybe some of these little places, like Qatar, like the Emirates, they do have that chance, or a Kuwait. But there is no such leader. And so it is, if somebody arises in one of these countries that is enlightened, and I'm sorry to now be very, very self-serving, believes in this index that we have, that if you in fact develop the right institutions under the umbrella of Islam, because there are some people who try to say or look at the thing that you're raising, how can these countries develop better? And I won't get into a fight with somebody who I totally disagree with. He's a Turkish fellow who teaches in the United States and who says that they should abandon Islam and become some other religion. Then they will do great. Now, I find that stupid. I'm sorry. I think that you need in these countries, as I said, some leader to rise that is not interested in having gold chairs and biggest diamond and this and that and all the trappings that are just stupid. They're silly. I mean, you look at a country like, if I may elaborate, you look at the United Arab Emirates, really Abu Dhabi, which has all the money. They don't need a museum from the Louvre. They can do so many things and help other countries around themselves. They have so much ability to do so. But I just don't see anyone in that realm. They all come down the same road. They want power, they want money, they want luxury, and that is not the way to development. That is the way to cronyism and social stagnation. And of course, in that process, they become dependent on countries like the United States to uphold them. So I really do believe that these countries, I dreamed that there would be such a person that would come about who would be selfless and who would want to change them. And I think they can do it.
Yeah, see, I want to refer to your own words. And when we talk about history of, let's say, England, how they started growing, and because they had about almost 100 years of wars, internal domestic wars. And if you ask any kind of economist or whatever, they would say that, yeah, they started making building manufactories, and it started that England started growing. And if you talk about the history of the United States, again, we refer some social processes. But when we talk about Islamic countries, you just mentioned that. See,
by the way, Muslim countries, I have to interrupt you. Call them Muslim countries because none of them are Islamic.
Oh yeah, that's
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be rude.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, exactly. Muslim countries. Yeah, and actually, officially, I think only 2 countries they have a Islam in their constitution. So yeah, I agree. Thank you for your correction. So, but when we talk about the Muslim countries, even you mentioned that you said that you are hoping for some leader. Why, when we talk about Muslim countries, we kind of we count on a rising of a leader, but when we talk about non-Muslim countries, mostly everything is connected to the society, to people. Is this kind of cultural determinism, or why do you think this in Muslim countries the role of leaders is so significant, at least more significant than in non-Muslim countries? Or it's just maybe my opinion?
No. I think the point you raised, I totally agree with it. That the way I came across, I totally agree with what you just said. I think that when you look at it, I don't know. You're right. I don't know why that is. I think you raised an important point that I'd like to think about what I'd said, because I think I'm wrong, is that, and you are correct, is that when you look at the history of the United States, sure, there have been along the way individuals who had a vision. Americans talk about the founding fathers, the group of, those founding fathers were not God's gift to the world. I mean, they had slaves, they did a lot of bad things, but they look at them, or they look at a Lincoln or a Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but there's not that same stress. You're absolutely correct, and I totally agree with you. I think that maybe it's a matter of history, that when you look at Muslim countries, they are much more, how should I say, they're much more divided, but they are much more subservient in some ways. And they do look to that leader. I mean, I can tell you my own experience in the Middle East is that, you know, you have someone who, well, I'll give you an example. I'll be very, very specific. There was a minister of finance of Iran after the revolution who I absolutely respected. He was a great man, honest man, and everything else. While he was alive, they would say, oh, he's this, he's that. The day he died, the guy who came, that guy was forgotten. There is no, I don't know how to put it to you. I can't put my finger on it. There was none of that continuity. It is, but I don't think it's in our blood. It's not in our blood that we're that way. But I think it's been conditioned as a matter of history. For instance, in Iran, you were always taught not to say what you feel because someone may be reporting you and you could have problems. So this was a part of, I mean, you know, right now in Iran, and I say these things openly, is that children are told by their parents when you go to school, they don't tell them that we've had a little bit of wine because that might be a problem. So you're taught at a very, very young age not to stand up, not to be honest, everything else. You kind of mind your own business and you keep to yourself. I don't know, maybe I've made no sense but I think the point that you raised excellent, and I would have to, in my limited brain, I would have to spend some time to think about your point, but I think it's very good. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I understand that very well because I mean, it's exactly the same thing. And, you know, when I was a university student, I was young, but later, then when you get older, and my grandmother, she always told me that it's not much about government.
I can't hear you, by the way. I can't hear you. The audio has gotten very bad, very scratchy. I didn't get any of what you said.
Now, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
It's loud enough, but it's all scratchy. I can't understand the word you're saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry we had a little technical problems, but it sounds like you mentioned that in many, I would say, the countries, if you say something critical and it's not recommended, and at the same time we got the problem, technical problem, but it's just coincidence. We didn't have we don't have any sensors or whatever. But I wanted to kind of back up that you know, I grew up in Soviet Union, and we had exactly the same system. I was a university student, and I was kind of a little critical, not opposition or whatever. Soviet Union didn't have any opposition, but I remember my grandmother. She lived in Stalin time, and she told me that don't say those type of words in the classroom. So that was I still remember that one. Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And when we just interrupted, I'm giving out our secrets that we talked that maybe mostly what we talked that is about the past and about maybe current situation, but it would be good to talk about the future. And I don't want our talk would sound like pessimistic. And I think it's hopelessness itself, in my understanding, it's a sin. So I don't want, I'm not hopeless, and I don't want to be hopeless, but I would like to ask you if we could continue our talk, and maybe we could now give some kind of conclusion, and at the same time to make the bridge to our next talk. And maybe next time we would talk about some projections that I don't know. Maybe you have those plans in your within your project, and also I would like to talk a little bit more about details, how you calculate that index. And I read them from your articles, but I wouldn't say that I understood everything. I'm sorry, because
You're being very modest. As a mathematician, you know much more than I do. I've got to tell you that.
Yeah, but I would like to talk about that too. And again, maybe based on your indices, maybe we can make some kind of projections about the future.
Sure. I would like to. And if I may, before our next discussion, I would like to send you a copy of the 2 books, ebooks about these indices, which I would appreciate just for you and your friends, because there's at least a little bit more detail on the teachings and the things that went into this. These are somewhat dated, but I think they might be helpful to you.
Yeah, that would be great. And I have your promise now. And again, I would like to thank you for your time. I really, really appreciate time, and mostly it's kind of like what we talked, maybe not too many positive things was mentioned, but for some reason I got energized positively. Maybe that's your own kind of like aura, or I don't know. I will analyze it later. But I think we have, at least it's even talking about these problems, understanding of the problem. It is about 50% of the future project, I think. I hope next time we can talk about that.
And I think hopefully next time, there's a few things when we talk about economics, which I think is kind of, you can infer from the life of the Prophet and also from the Quran, that really are very, very similar to what we say in modern economics, which I think are very important, that Muslims should understand, about their own system, and they don't. And so I think, and I hope I'm not being too arrogant saying Muslims don't know what they're doing, but I'm sorry to say it, I think a lot of the things that are there, they don't really appreciate. As much as I think prayers are important, they're not a substitute for doing the things that are important for human and societal development. I think one should, doesn't do any harm if you pray 5 times a day, but it doesn't solve all the problems, by no means.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I'm one of those Muslims who know very little about Muslim economy and all those rules. And apparently, when you talked about that, I realized myself that what I know about Islam, mostly how to pray and when to pray and when to fast. But I mean, that was just pray was 5 times a day, right? Even during Prophet's time. But what did they do other time? And maybe we can talk about that.
But you see, I think that's what you say is so important. I think that in times, again, not to offend people, but I remember vividly, actually in Saudi Arabia, they said, just go and pray and shut up. If you're walking in the street when it's prayer time, in the olden days, I don't know what it's like now, the mutawa would come after you, go to the mosque, they beat you, if you look like a Muslim, like you and I do, not if you look blue-eyed, because they're not supposed to go there. But I'm just saying, that's what they want to do, just to keep you in the mosque. That's all you have to do to be a good Muslim. That's what they're trying to teach us.
Yeah, so again, I will stop recording. And I would like to thank you again for your time, and hope we will continue. And now I will stop recording. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. It's been a
But,
delight
yeah,
to be with you.
but yeah, if you could stay in the line just for a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.